The Garden. Once upon a time, there was a little girl whose mom moved house, and her dad moved house too, but to somewhere else, and sometimes she went to stay with him, but it always felt cold in his new house, even when it was warm. There was an echo to the smooth, shiny surface of everything that made you think of knives and sharp edges. Mom's house was in the country, and it was the opposite. It was so warm and full of people and noise of busyness and that you couldn't even breathe. The air was always full of steam and talk, and there was no peace. So the child started to play outside in the garden to get away from the noise. She never had a garden before, but even she had, it wouldn't have compared to this one. This one was smooth lawn afield and stretched out of running, and pretty shrubs cut into shape near the house, but down along to the back of it there was an orchard of bitter apples, and behind that a hedge high as the sky and thorny and tangled and thicker than walls. If you were small enough, you could slip through a gap between two apples and wriggle your way into a space under the hedge. Thorns and leaves all around, invisible from grown-ups and cousins into the whole world. When I found it first, I was looking for a hiding place. But I found I could wriggle along on my belly for a while and come out to the other side into the woods. The woods where every fairy tale I'd ever heard must have happened. I'd never seen such woods. I hadn't thought they came like this. The trees were wide apart and very old and thick at the first time I found it. There were bluebells coveling all around like carpet. I stepped so carefully I didn't want to break them. They made a little ringing noise, so high and faint I was sure I was imagining it, but not sure at the same time. I saw a squirrel that sat and looked at me for a long time, and then moved away like liquid poured into a squirrel shape. I'd never seen a squirrel before, never. Birds with big black eyes and orange faces watched me from the trees. They looked like they might speak at any moment. After I found the way into the woods, I went back every day. I couldn't hear any sounds from the houses or from the road or from Mom's house when I was in the woods. Mom thought I was playing in the garden, and I didn't tell her different. I didn't want to ask her about the woods and have shown her them on the map or say what they were called, and of course she knew about them. I secretly suspect that the woods might be real, and that would mean they weren't fairy tale at all, just normal and not secret or special or only mine. I was sure there were talking animals and elves and things in the woods, and they always just left when I got there. There were faces that smiled from the barks of the big, gnarled old trees, and the trees were perfect for climbing on. One had a branch shaped like a hammock that was just a bit too high to be comfortable lying on in a case I rolled over. But I did anyway, for the butterflies in my stomach. And there were the birds. I don't know what kind. I still don't know. But they had those orange faces and they looked at me with black beady eyes. And I never saw them sing, though woods are always noisy, with insects and bird songs. And if you stayed still long enough, the noises got louder and louder. I always found something new there. Red berries bright as poisons, mushrooms dark and spongy and smelling of damp. How long did I go visiting there? I don't know if it was a season or a year or two or three. I don't remember the seasons changing. I don't remember if the leaves ever fell. I don't remember snow or rain, but I think I was there for ages. Time doesn't pass the same way for children. It pulls around you, slow and thick as tree lace. It's not important, I suppose. I love the woods, and they were my safe place. My favorite place that I went back to and back. One day, when I went back, the woods were different. I noticed straight away that it was darker, but I saw some small red flowers like sparks in the gloom and wandered heedlessly away, and some unknowable time later I heard the silence that was suddenly all around. My heart speed up without my knowing why. The smiling faces in the tree bark were all turned away. The birds with orange faces were all gone. Every sound I made was loud as a gunshot against the absence of noise, no rustling or squeezing or insects hum or bird songs. And then a sound, only one, a movement, a shift of weight. Some animals sleep inside all of us still, and pricks its ears at danger and knows to be afraid of dark. I think children are closer to it. In any case, I knew, utterly and completely, that something was there, that it was watching me, and that it was bigger than me. I was young enough that I didn't try to talk myself out of being afraid. I froze. For hours it felt like. And then another sound, a woof of breath from off to the side, and I ran. I ran blind, on instinct, and something followed me. I did not look behind. I was the monster under the bed, and the big bad wolf, and the boogeyman, and I didn't need to look at it to know that I should run. No part of me thought it might be the only imagination. It might be a fox or a dog or even an animal escaped from the zoo. It was real and it was playing with me. I heard it ahead of me and I veered away. And I hear the woof, woof, woof of its breath again. But now it sounded like a laughter. It played with me like a cat playing with a mouse. But it wasn't a cat. I swivered to get away and swerved again. But it was always faster than me, always in the way. And just like a cat playing with the mouse, once in a very great while the mouse gets away. I saw my tunnel through the hedge, almost invisible from the side, and dived in, head first without thinking. The thing made a noise, a shrieking growl of frustration, and it grabbed at my legs, reached in to pull me out. Have you ever tried to flee for your life by crawling on your belly through a low, dark hole while something pulls and scratches at your feet, at the backs of your legs, your backside? I'd say it's not something you forget, but I did forget, or decide to forget. I know that must have happened, but the next thing I recall is understanding at the far side of the sour apple orchard, trying to catch my breath and convince myself to turn around and make sure that it wasn't following. I could see my mom through the window, yellow lights spilling out, and two of my aunts in there with her, and a cousin I didn't like. I didn't like any of them, and it looked so normal and boring, and I forced myself to look at that claustrophobic comfort and breathed in great gulps of air, and I told myself that no monster could exist in the same world as mothers who made the same chicken casserole again and again, even though she knows I don't like it, and cousins who leave sticky fingerprints on all your things but have to play with anyway, even if you don't want to. And after a while, I turned back, and the orchard was empty behind me. I even dared myself to walk all the way to my secret entrance, and I stood by it, but not close enough to grab, just in case. And I listened for the sound of something big and cruel trying to dig. I heard nothing but had the sudden image of the beast standing just on the other side of the hedge, watching the same hole on its side as I was watching on my side, and only a screen of leaves and branches away. I bolted back to the house, all in panic all over again. Mom gave out to me for ruining my trousers, but she didn't scold long or loud, and she had me and drew me a bath and didn't make me play with my cousins after dinner. You would think that I never have gone back. Why would I go back? But children think differently. For a week, maybe two, I didn't go back. The thought was terrifying. And then I went to stay with my dad, and he took me to the fun fair, and it was the first good visit ever. So it all faded back behind lights and candy floss, and you don't really hold on to memories at that age. And the house was still stuffy, and the garden wasn't nearly as good. So I found myself back at the end of the orchard again and again. And in the end, I went through. The tunnel was bigger on the wood side now. It must have tried to get through after all. That made me feel worse and better all after the same time. Worse because it was such a tangible evidence that it was really real and had really happened and it had really chased me and really dug up real soil. And better because it definitely couldn't get through even though it had tried to. I was cautious. I lay in the tunnel ready to wriggle back at the first sight or sound. But I could hear the birds singing and the insects humming, and I thought I saw a frog hop, and I never seen one up close before. A bird with an orange face landed close enough to make me jump and put its head on the side and said trip, exactly like it was saying the word trip, as if I was asking me where I'd been all this time. I was absolutely sure then that the birds would talk to me one day and say more than just chirp. The faces in the trees were all smiling again, and I'd forgotten all about the monster by the time I found the little dark pond with all the little frogs. But I always check after that. Once or twice it was quiet in the woods, and I didn't hear the birds, and I backed out. Once I felt dark, but I heard birds singing and almost wriggled through when I heard a woof, woof, and went backwards as fast as I could. But still, I felt the air move on my face from where it reached for me. It must have waited for hours, the woods to forget about, and it started being noisy again. I only went through after that if I saw an orange-faced bird. They were my allies, my best friends, and I trusted them. One would always land it was safe. One day, walking and swishing a big straight stick and being a pirate, an orange-faced bird flew at my head in a whir of wings and I bolted for home. I don't know for sure if the beast was there that day, but I trusted the birds. The poor birds. I didn't know then it was so clever. It almost got me. one time more. I wriggled through, and I waited under the hedge, and saw an orange-faced bird on the ground. I pushed myself on my forearms and waited to hear say chirp or something else, but it didn't move. I saw it was dead the exact same second that the beast leaped at me, roaring now enraged, not treating this as a game anymore. I propelled myself backwards by my wrist and my elbow, and I don't know how it didn't get me. It swiped at me with these huge dark claws. I shoot out of my tunnel at the orchard end like a champagne cork going out of the bottle. I have a small white scar on the end of my nose. I tell people I got it falling out of a tree. It wasn't safe after that. It just wasn't. I knew it was waiting for me, and the birds would be no help to me, or if they helped, it would be kill them for helping me. I never would have gone back, ever. First, there was school and growing up, and then there was college and less climbing trees and more dresses and boys and even, eventually, a job, a home for my own in the city. Mom got a dog for herself for Christmas to take it for walks. Going for a walk became Mom's new favorite thing, and every time I go down to see her, we go for a walk somewhere. Going for a walk means finding a place with paths all marked out and marching down them as fast as you can without looking around at anything much. With the dog yapping its head off at everything that moves or makes small noises. Last week, I went to visit and she brought me to a place called Tolson Wood. We drove for an hour to gravel parking lot and there were hardly any paths. But for once, Mom didn't mind. It was so lovely and as we were strolling, she told me, "You wouldn't think of it how far we had to drive. But these woods are huge. They back up practically right into our garden, your aunt told me." And I went cold from the top of my head to the tips of my toes. I froze solid in the space between one heartbeat and the next. And Mom went on and on about how lovely and amused about whether she could get the hedge knocked down and make a path. "I don't think you're allowed," I said, because Mom cares about being allowed to do things, and what was I supposed to say? I wanted the thick, thorny hedge firmly in place between Mom and these deep, dark woods. It can't be that dangerous, I told myself. Even though my heart was speeding up, I was less clever now that I wasn't a child anymore. There are people here, I told myself, and paths and hiking trails marked out with splashes of color on the tree bark. I could still see faces in the trees. They stared at me, as if I'd violated some awful taboo in coming back. I saw a bird with an orange face. It regarded me solemnly and said, "Trip," in a flat, sad voice. The dog barked at it, but it didn't fly away. It stared sadly at me with his black, bottomless eyes. I faked a sudden stomach cramp to get Mom to get me out of here. She didn't argue. "You've gone white," she said. Back at the car, there was a dead bird with an orange face left delicately on the passenger side windshield. "It's so hideously clever. You know," Mom said as we drove away. "I don't think I'll go back there. It looks nice enough, but there's a kind of an atmosphere. And that poor dead bird, a cat got at it, and she tsked about irresponsible pet owners." "I'm glad she won't go back," I don't know if it would come after her. I don't see why it would, but then I don't know. It's not like I can go back there and check on her. I ran back to the city as fast as I could and told work I was taking all my save up holidays and I came here as far away as I can think of. I don't know what to do. Now that I'll see it all written down, it isn't like a fairy tale at all. If it was the birds who have told me where to find the silver bullet or the magic sword, and I'd kill the monster or turn it human with the keys, and I'll be the chosen one and live happily ever after in a fairy tale woods. I think I might be far enough away. Maybe if I just wait, just hide for a while. It forgot about me before. Maybe it will again. Later. It's so clever. Dead birds with orange face outside the hotel when we went home for coffee. Inside now. I don't know what to do. Can it work locks? Orange feathers on carpet. It's so clever.